Hey, it's Nomad here, and in this video, I'm going to answer a few questions that were sent to me by one of the listeners of the podcast and watchers of the YouTube channel, and I decided to sort of start transitioning some of the content here to the videos and talk about some things that I've talked about previously. So if you're new to this channel, I'm the Coco Nomad. I've been traveling abroad now from the US for about 5 years, constantly changing countries, but at a slower pace than a lot of people. I'm not a person now who sort of jumps from one country to the next really frequently, although I did when I first got started. Now I tend to stay places a bit longer. This year would have been different had it not been for the coronavirus, COVID-19. I actually would not be here in Colombia, which is where I am now, currently living in Medellin. And I would have already transitioned to another place. Usually I try to stay places for between 3 and 6 months, and I'm on month 7 now because, quite frankly, it's not necessarily a place that I can go yet. So, but I do like to share on this channel tips, tricks, techniques for working and living abroad, being able to balance your work life and travel and make the most of your life this way. So continue to watch, hit like and subscribe, ring the bell if you want to get more notifications of more videos like this, and I'll go into some of these questions. So I'll just start with about 3 or 4 questions that have been asked so far. So let's get started. So the first question I was asked is, how do you find nice places to stay? And this really does depend on where you are and your preferences. So I'm a pretty low-key traveler. I don't necessarily need a lot of luxury. In fact, it makes me a little bit uncomfortable. I've stayed in some really high-end places a few times in my life for either work or just a splurge for travel. And personally, it just feels really, really weird. So I tend not to do that a lot. I'm not saying that, if you like that lifestyle, you want to be pampered, you want to glamp, which I have done, by the way, and it was very, I do recommend that. If you're going to go camping, glamping is the way to go. But I typically look for sort of like, not quite necessarily hostels, although I will do those for shorter stays, but Airbnbs. I do use Airbnb the most of all the sites that I use to find places to stay. I also use hotels.com depending on where I am. Usually though, that's only when I'm coming back to the States to visit for a couple of weeks. And then bookings.com, which is also a good source I've found for some good savings in different places. I actually found a great apartment when I was in Tallinn, Estonia a few years ago on booking.com. So it is definitely something you should look into. I think I've only used hotels outside of the United States one time when I was in Bulgaria. I was in Sofia for like 3 or 4 days, and I booked via hotels.com for that particular location. I do rely and do suggest that you lean on Facebook groups. And if you're not on Facebook, I get it, but it is a really, really good resource, particularly the travel groups. To join different travel groups, lots of times you can either just simply search what's there for certain questions that you may have, or you can just ask directly. I do recommend searching first, because some groups will definitely give you the snarky response of just use the search first. But if you're, depending on what type of living or location, if you want to search for groups to join, look for names like expat or digital nomads or families or travel in, and then insert the name of the country and or city you're interested in, and then you can find some groups. Most of the time it's not a big deal or a problem to join those groups. You may have to fill out a short little questionnaire in order to get approved. Some are open, you can just join. So just join those groups. They're great resources for not just places to stay, but areas in the town that you might want to visit, or better places to live, great places to eat. There was a great one. I spent a lot of time in Playa del Carmen at the end of last year, about 4 months, and there's currently like this list of places to get good tacos. And it's so funny because it's like, I've eaten at a lot of these places because I'm a huge taco fanatic. And so it's just like a couple of local places that are like not restaurants, or some people will say, oh, go to this restaurant, go to this restaurant. It's like, no. You need to go to this street stall between these 2 streets behind the shopping center. So like, that is literally the best taco in town. And that's the kind of information that you'll get when you join these local groups. So for me, I use it for finding places to stay too, because some people will recommend certain areas. YouTube is another great one too. I'm just coming onto this platform in terms of making videos about travel and work and whatnot, but There are tons of other people who have great videos, great channels that I'll drop a couple in the show notes or description, so I'm not even used to that. And you can see a couple of channels for different areas or travelers who have some really good recommendations that I've relied on as well in the past. So hope that helps, and we'll move on to the next question. Question number 2 is, how do you budget your trips? Now, everyone's budget's going to be a bit different because jobs and work situations and lifestyle and just what you like. So sort of take this with a grain of salt. Starting traveling back in 1998, I took my first trip to Europe, and I used this Frommer's guide. It was like Europe for $50 a day, and somehow that number, $50 US, by the way, that number just got stuck in my head. Like, I just kept it moving forward as far as like a travel budget. I've never really changed it. I don't go above it. I'm typically way below it depending on the location, but it sort of serves as a guidepost. It's kind of my upper bounds. Like, I tend to like not want to go over $50 a day on average. Now, because I travel full time, I'm nomadic. I don't live anywhere permanently anymore. I've sort of uprooted myself from the US. I use a longer time horizon for that. So I sort of balance it out. For instance, a couple of years ago, I was traveling around. I was in Mexico for a bit of time. I was here in Colombia for a bit, and I was in Costa Rica for about 2 months. Costa Rica was easily the most expensive of those 3 places, and I ended up spending a bit more while I was there, but I just sort of balanced it out with the other locations that I was staying in over the course of that year, and making sure that I maintain that $50 a day max for where I live. And the bulk of that in most places really would normally go to my lodging. A lot of times I'm trying to spend between $20 and $30 a day on lodging, but I like to book longer term stays where I can get that. So if I'm going to be somewhere, I'm not usually there for 2 weeks. Costa Rica was a little bit different. I was in one location. I was in Puerto Viejo, and that was for like a couple of weeks. And then back in San Jose, and then back and forth. And so some of these stays were shorter, and they tend to be a little bit more expensive, so you don't really get a discount. But I tend to book longer stays so that I can get the discounts. Like, for instance, I live in an Aparta hotel here in Medellin, and because I book a longer stay, I get a huge discount. Now it's even greater now because there's just not that many people traveling, so it's even less. And I'm going to do another video right after this that will talk about the specific cost of being here in my last 6 months since January. I came here on January 1st, and I'll go into detail about the specific cost of living here in Medellin while I'm here this time. But other places are way cheaper. When I lived in Thailand, I lived in Chiang Mai, it was way cheaper. I probably spent max $25 a day, like if that. My apartment was about $450 a month, and it was really nice. And I had a luxury apartment even for Chiang Mai at the time. And I eat a lot of street food. I love street food. I tend to eat there, and it's weird. I take a lot of cooking classes, but I don't really cook a lot. So it was really inexpensive. But then when I went to Europe, it cost a lot more. So but I was traveling more, hitting more places. But even in cities like Lisbon, I spend a lot more money when I'm there. And so I sort of try to balance out my travels to sort of stay at this relative cost at that time. So hope that helps in terms of thinking about setting your own budget and determining for yourself how you like to go about maintaining your costs as you're traveling around. Let's move on to the next question. So question number 3 is how to not get ripped off. Now this one's a little different in terms of where you are, and again, depending on the research. I really think, again, you really should depend on communities and do your sort of research before you go to a location and understand what the situation is like before you get there. There are cities that you're just visiting, even if you're just as a tourist or you're going to stay a little bit longer, make sure you get that intel. Make sure you understand like the parts of town you're living in, the situations there economically, security-wise, the kinds of things you need to watch out for. Now, that being said, I think you have to have some basic street sense in terms of like just going around and carrying yourself. And I know I've noticed that not everybody has that, because I watched some people walking around. I'm like, I cannot believe this person's walking around this city just wide-eyed looking around like, oh wow, look at this. And I'm just like, whoa, you need to protect your neck. Like you gotta keep your wits about you and keep your head on a swivel. And so, like, for instance, here there is a saying, it's like no des papaya, and it's basically like don't be a target, don't be a mark. And it's like, don't walk around with like expensive jewelry on and like flashing money and things like that. People notice that stuff. And if you have an eye for that, like I've been walking on the streets. I remember once in Mexico City, I could literally watch these two guys casing people. And I shot one of the guys a look, just like, I know what you're doing. And then so they kind of do this kind of look off thing where he's like, try to pretend like, it's like, yeah, if you have an eye for that and you pay attention, walk with purpose is another one too. It's just like, even if you don't know where you're going, walk like you know where you're going. And if you need to ask directions, don't pull out your phone or a map if you're still using maps. Don't do that on the street. Walk into a coffee shop, ask for directions, ask a shopkeeper, someone like that, and do that outside of plain view. You do not want to look like someone who doesn't know where they are and they don't know where they're going. So pay attention to your surroundings. This is all sort of like, I think after you travel, it's just like easy things to know. But if you're just getting started and you're not sure, and it's not to say like don't walk around. You don't have to be fearful walking around. Just be mindful. Just pay attention and make sure. Paying attention will help you in another way too. Is like I travel in a lot of cities where there's lots of scooters and or cars, and everyone doesn't drive the same way as they may in your home country. So that same sort of awareness will also keep you from getting hit. So just keep that in mind. It's just situational awareness and protecting yourself and making sure that you're mindful of your surroundings and that you don't look like an easy target. Hope that helps. On to the next question. So the fourth and final question for this particular video is, I think, an important one for people who do have to work while abroad, or you're traveling, or you're trying to make a life where you're living abroad. And that is the ubiquitous, what about Wi-Fi? It's like you will find yourself asking pretty much in every place and probably trying to learn some way to say that in any language regardless of where you are, like what's the Wi-Fi password? So for me, I tend to, again, do a little bit of research, find out beforehand, especially if you're looking to book somewhere. Pay attention to the reviews. Like if you're on Airbnb, look at reviews and see what people say about Wi-Fi connections and things like that, because people will talk about everything inside of the reviews. And if you're a little concerned, then maybe look for somewhere else. There is like a business class with Airbnb now too. So it's like those places pretty much have that in place. Like they know you're coming to a place and you're trying to get work done. So you may want to just lean towards those kinds of bookings. I tend to do that. I tend to look at the business class bookings and sort of the rapid approval, because a lot of times I don't have time to go back and forth. And I'm bad about this. This is a super flaw. I know some friends that are listening will probably be like, why don't you ever negotiate? I'm terrible at it. I don't like doing it. I'd rather just like, if I see the price, I'm just gonna go with the price. And if it's not a price that I like, I'm just gonna keep shopping. I'm not gonna get into a whole bunch of back and forth. But if you are like, unlike me, and you do wanna save some money, then absolutely engage in, you can ask questions too of the host and see what kinds of internet connections, things like that. The other thing that I tend to do is I buy local SIMs. Pretty much every country I go into, I will either get it at the airport, which I try not to do, but sometimes just depends on the sitch, I'll have to do it, or I'll wait until I get into town. I'll go to a local store, a local shop, or a kiosk, and I'll get hooked up with a local SIM card and a plan there. And it's not that you're gonna get ripped off, as it were, but you're just gonna pay a little bit more sometimes. And it's relative too, because like, it costs a lot. Whenever I go back to the US and I try to get like a temporary data plan or something like that, I always end up spending like between 40 and 60 bucks for what would cost me $6 or $7 max in a lot of these other countries I'm in. So I like to have a local SIM card. In some places, Wi-Fi is ubiquitous too. You can find it just about anywhere. So like for instance, a lot of the parks here in Medellin already have Wi-Fi. So I just kind of like, I'm not consuming all of that data. I tend to only use my Wi-Fi data plan on my phone for like getting a car to go from one location to another, trying to find my place if I'm meeting friends in another part of the city. Here, I'm super comfortable, so I don't even use the data card anymore because I know my neighborhood very well. I walk around, I almost never need any data outside of either like a coffee shop, co-working space, or my own building. So just keep that. You're gonna probably rely on the reviews and recommendations for the lodging, but it's not a bad idea to pick up a local SIM card. Now, that being said, if you need a lot of data because you're going to be doing like video calls and stuff, that's not really going to work. You might want to scout out a couple of backup locations, which is what I do. For instance, if there's a Starbucks or some similar type of coffee franchise, they're usually going to have really decent Wi-Fi. And if I have to absolutely positively work from a location like that, I'll do that. I also find a local co-working space that I can go into, because those also will typically have really good internet as well. And looking to getting either a day pass, a week pass, or like a membership, depending on how long you're going to be there. Some will even sell you hours. You can just say, look, I'm going to be in this city for 3 to 4 days or a week. I just need a package of like 15 hours where I can just come in here and work, and that'll be fine. So that's another option for you as well. But that backup, I think, is important. Just always scout out and have a location where, just in case, even in my apartment building, if the Wi-Fi is bad, like I can always go to the co-working space, or I'll walk over to a Starbucks or a coffee shop or something like that, just to make sure that if I'm pressed for time for a deliverable or I have a meeting, then I can absolutely get that done. Or just fall back to the card, knowing I'm just gonna have to top up my card if I'm just gonna have to blow through a few hundred megs for a video call. So there you go. Hope these things helped. Again, if you get any value out of this, please click like and subscribe, ring the bell to get notifications. If you have any other travel questions, because I do get them a lot and I can't necessarily always think of them in advance, comment below and I'll do another video, 3-4 questions that anybody might have, and get more specific about location selection. I can get more specific about working abroad and the types of work that you can do. I do several different things. I am a software developer by trade, but that is not the only thing that I do. So just keeping that in mind, and hope you get some great value out of this. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.